Right now on Law&Crime Report, the St. Louis couple, Mark and Patricia McCloskey, who went viral after pulling guns on protesters, have been hit with a felony weapons charge. Plus, New Jersey police have linked a deceased attorney to the shooting, which left Judge Esther Salas' son dead and her husband seriously injured. Den Hollander, a self-proclaimed anti-feminist attorney, has been named as a suspect. Later, new information has been released on the tragic death of Louisville EMT Breonna Taylor. Taylor was briefly alive after being shot by the police, but no aid was rendered.
I don't know what's happening. Somebody kicked in the door and shot my girlfriend.
Law&Crime Report, where we dive into the true crime and all legal stories making headlines, is Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. Good afternoon, I'm your host, Brian Buckmire, here at Law&Crime Report. Again, we're bringing you the true crime and legal stories that are hitting the headlines. Let's start off with the Louisville couple. Now, we've been covering this both on this network and some of the special reports and other shows, and we saw it from the very beginning. We saw where we had a couple not just stand on their porch, but come onto the lawn when protesters walked by in a Black Lives Matter protest, marching towards the mayor to ask for charges against the officers who had killed Breonna Taylor. Let's throw to the clip, let's see what we're arguing, and let's go from there. Now I'm joined by Lisa Lockwood, a great guest here on the Law&Crime Trial Network, but also a plethora of information when it comes to police force as well as the military. Lisa, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Brian.
Now, Lisa, the first thing I want to ask you about this is because you know gun safety. You know it from your background, inside and out. When you see two individuals standing with a gun in that manner, what do you see based on your background?
Well, it's a threatening manner when they start to wave and point the weapon. If they're holding the weapon and trying to protect their domicile and using it just for the point of intimidation, where it's not point in a dangerous direction, which is at people, it's two different stories. You can see where they're holding the weapon, and hundreds of protesters went up that street to go to the mayor's house, as you said earlier. So hundreds of people are passing. Finger on the trigger. If you're looking at the woman, it appears her finger's on the trigger. His is not. His is in a safety position. So, you know, it's an intimidating use of force. However, the Castle Doctrine shows that if you want to protect your property from being invaded or somebody that's coming in and onto your property, you have the right to use deadly force for that purpose.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this Castle Doctrine applies, and I've been going back and forth with a lot of my friends who are lawyers as well, and I think my disadvantage is many of my clients don't have large properties in this way, and so I think the Castle Doctrine really becomes curious because oftentimes the Castle Doctrine kind of stops and starts close to your front door. It's not like a bright line, but I've never seen it extend all the way to the front lawn and even sometimes the sidewalk. And so I know that initially they said that they approached outside with the guns because they heard the gate being broken, and there's some video that controverts that. I think it's going to be a really difficult time for the judge, regardless of how they come out on it, as to how the Castle Doctrine extends. If the Castle Doctrine does extend, I think you are correct because they didn't fire in that sense. If the Castle Doctrine doesn't apply, let's assume the judge goes the other way around and says, you know what? Castle Doctrine's only really a thing if someone breaks into your home, if they're robbing you, if they came onto your porch, but you came out. Do you think that this could fall maybe in a bad place for the couple if the Castle Doctrine is not applied here?
Certainly, and all of those factors need to be looked at. One of the things the couple said is 2 to 3 individuals violently threaten them. So I would like to see video footage of that. There are plenty of people out there using their cell phone cameras and getting video footage. So we have 2 small little brief clips, and we don't know where they were threatened, how they were threatened, what manner in which they were threatened, how many individuals did they cross a line. So we have to look at the perspective of the homeowners in that particular case and find out what was their rationale and mentality based on what was happening in those moments.
Yeah, what I'm getting from this, Lisa, is there's a lot of facts that we need. I think at this point, we've really just kind of touched the surface, and the hope is that as we go on, more facts will help us make this determination. Let's switch gears just a little to get an update on another big case that we've been following, and that is the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell is accused, we've covered this in the past, of 6 different types of felonies. Some of the highest ones, she can face jail times from 10 years up to life, and the more serious charges are about her, 1, enticing minors for the purpose of engaging in sexual activity, and also transporting minors for the same purpose, going from either New York to Florida or to Jeffrey Epstein's New Mexico location. Now we're hearing more stories that not only did Ghislaine Maxwell kind of help to orchestrate a lot of what Jeffrey Epstein was alleged to have committed, and maybe kept even some of the receipts, but also that she used $25,000 in payment to get Jacob Wool to smear Epstein accusers and trying to hush those allegations. Let's look at one of the accusers who spoke about Maxwell as being even worse than Jeffrey Epstein.
She's a monster. She's worse than Epstein. She did things even worse than Epstein did. She was vicious, she was evil, and she's a woman.
Her lawyers have said Ghislaine Maxwell is not a Jeffrey Epstein, that she has been a victim of media spin.
They're doing their job, but I know that woman. I've known her really well. Put it this way. Epstein was Pinocchio, and she was Geppetto. She was the guy controlling
the strings.
Jeffrey. Yep, she was pulling the strings. She had his money. He had her contacts, but Ghislaine was much more conniving and smart than Epstein ever was. And I asked her, I said, why are you having all these girls come in and sleep with your boyfriend? And she was like, so I don't have to do it all the time. You know, so she made like a joke out of it.
Why do you think she did it?
She did it to keep Jeffrey happy, for sure. She did it because she loves the control over people. Jeffrey was a sick pedophile, but she was the mastermind.
Now, Lisa, often the adage goes, if you don't have the facts, you argue the law. If you don't have the law, you argue the facts. Ghislaine Maxwell seems to be out of both. I don't see a legal or a factual argument here. This seems to be quite the allegation. And again, the woman there brings up a great point. I don't know how she's going to argue about flying teenage girls around the country and what the excuse would be there. I see this as quite the difficult case. What do you see?
Yes, I agree with that. And actually doing the payoff to try to get the attorney fired in the case, that was proven through her LLC. It was actually proven the same way that she went about buying the mansion that she lived in. It came from that account to pay the $25,000 to try to get the attorney fired who was handling the case in order to create a smear campaign. So we have facts. We have actual facts in that circumstance and what was just brought out into the media and brought out to the public right now. So she is going to have a very challenging time.
Yeah, and Lisa, you hit the nail on the head. I don't want to miss a single word here. As part of the $25,000 deal, Wool and his lobbyist colleague Jack Berkman are also alleged to have pushed to get former, as you were saying, New York U.S. Attorney Geoffrey Berman fired. Berman was ultimately pushed out by Barr in June, but 2 weeks later, Maxwell was charged as part of Epstein's sex trafficking ring. Lisa, I haven't seen it, but this seems to be the most convoluted, intermingled, tangled legal mess that every day you seem to hear 5 new people who are involved in this. Have you ever seen something as intricate and complicated as this in your career?
No, I haven't. In the amount of time it took to bring down this ring, Jeffrey Epstein initially, with the initial charges with him and a slap on the wrist, then following up and getting him again and getting him back in prison with the new charges. And why did it take so long? They really needed to dot the I's and cross the T's to make sure they had a good enough case against her. And now more and more evidence is being presented to us.
Now, in types of cases like this, Lisa, there's obviously, we know, so many moving pieces in the background in terms of police investigations, what the prosecutors are filing, things of that nature. When you have a case this big, I know as defense attorneys, we like to say, hey, if the machine is too big, we can at least find one or two gears that might have been missing or might have not moved the right way. But how do investigations from the police perspective operate when you're saying, hey, this isn't just a little baggie of weed on the street corner, this is a huge entity? How do you investigate that case to make sure it's as airtight as what we are perceiving here?
Because, like you said, when you have something small, you don't want to blow it. You don't want to show your cards and show your hand. So you may overlook the smaller charges because you don't want them to be able to prepare for the bigger ones that are coming through. So you want it to stick. You want them not to be able to make bail, as important as it is in this case as well, because of her wealth and her contacts that she can certainly skip. She had a safe house in the home when they executed the search warrant, and she had a cell phone that had tinfoil on it to hide where she was. So certainly they realized that they needed to set a bail and no bond for her.
Yeah, and no bond, of course, meaning that there's no amount of money she can pay. I know one of the biggest fears that I think the judge might have been justified in not sending bond, and I would say this affirmatively, I am not a big fan of not giving bond, but in some situations, following the law, it kind of makes sense. She was a French national. She's a French citizen. And France would not be wrong in stopping her from coming into the country because she's a citizen. From my understanding, at least, France doesn't deport its citizens. So if the United States wanted to try to get her back from France, that could be a diplomatic mess, and therefore it makes sense not to have bond in that situation. However, on the other side, Lisa, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, everyone's thinking, well, Jeffrey Epstein didn't make it to court, and people are fearful that she may not. How do you kind of protect against that when there's a very valid fear for her safety?
And I believe she has every right to have that fear because of the conspiracy surrounding his death, because of the investigations with Jeffrey Epstein to find out whether or not he took his own life or he was suicided, so to speak. So she already had that belief. She told other people in her inner circle that she believes he was murdered. He did not take his life. So certainly she has that fear. It's there. So with that, and with the issue that happened during Jeffrey Epstein, with the surveillance, with cameras not working, with records being fudged by the officers who were supposed to check and make sure Jeffrey Epstein was okay. I mean, everything that could have happened wrong in that case. So here's an opportunity to do every single thing right.
Yeah, and here's hoping that everyone does that, take that opportunity to do everything right, because at some point we need to see some form of justice, regardless of how the facts lay out. But we're going to continue with more here at Law and Crime Report after this break. All right, welcome back to Law and Crime Report. We're again giving you the top legal stories and headlines. Let's move on to George Floyd, because today the four officers are in court for another hearing. They're talking about a number of issues. They're talking about the gag order, saying that the governor had violated that, but they're also talking about new claims that we've heard that Officer Chauvin had multiple complaints against him, at least 22 of which only one of them led to it being a disciplinary act. Now, I have with us Lisa Lockwood, as also I have Austin Dove, trial attorney and co-founder of Protesters Defense Alliance. Good morning, or sorry, good afternoon to you both. Austin, let's start off with you. As this George Floyd case continues, it seems that we are getting more and more information about not only the officers in general, but also the investigation. We're diving deep into their IAB reports or internal reports about who they were as officers. As we learn more, how do you see this storyline being colored and changed as we understand more and more?
Well, it really unfolds on the side of what does their defense look like. There's going to be layers and layers of what really is discovery. You have news media involved, delving in deep. You have lawyers on both sides, one resisting, the other pushing for more information. And then we know that these reports are going to tell us a lot. Not only do we have audio that's coming up that's being delved into, we've got video, multiple sources, people recorded it. There's information from the medical responding officers, and of course, the internal investigations. All that kind of comes together to tell you, to paint a much better picture, a much more complete picture about what happened, what occurred out there. And it's really going to be telling as to how the defense and how the story that these attorneys will put on as they try to, deflect responsibility and prevent their clients from being held responsible to the extent that they're being charged.
Yeah. Now, Lisa, part of the hearing today is about the judge lifting the gag order and also imposing sanctions on Attorney General Keith Ellison. The defense wants them to lift the gag order so they can speak, because I would assume the defense seems somewhat bootstrapped by following the gag order, and they're also saying that Attorney General Keith Ellison is not following the gag order. What do you make of some of the arguments that you think could be heard in this based on what you've seen Attorney General Ellison say in the media?
Well, I believe there is some credence to him disclosing the fact that he has 4 pro bono superstar attorneys that are coming out of the case, because what that does is it allows the public to see that there's potential for bias against the officers. There's bias in the fact that people are coming on board because they have such a strong belief in this. And what does that do on the other side? The defense attorney doesn't have an opportunity to come forward and talk about the case or talk about manners that could potentially protect the other officers involved. So you have to have it one way or the other. Nobody speaks about it, or both parties have the opportunity and the gag order is lifted.
Yeah. And Austin, there is some credence to that. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't think there's any love lost for what those 4 officers did to George Floyd. But at the end of the day, you've got to think of the tenements of the law and ensure that if everyone follows them. Because if gag orders aren't followed in this case, in other cases there could be greater harm, especially to that population of people who are dragged through the criminal justice system a lot more. Do you think that this is a case that maybe when we start to get to the factual allegations here, that gag orders should be followed, that maybe Keith Ellison should maybe not create those holes in which we as defense attorneys often drive through when he brings up points in the media?
Well, I mean, a big part of this is going to be what narrative and what information is out there that might also contaminate the potential jury pool. The more that's told, the more that's revealed, the more difficult it will be for those attorneys when they're putting on their cases, when they're putting on the defense in front of a fact finder like a jury. The more difficult it will be to say, oh, ignore this information. I know you may have already heard about that. Or when they're screening these jurors, then trying to ask them in that voir dire process, what information do you know? Most of them will say, we know a great deal, some of which is going to be colored by one side or another. So to your point, I agree. We have to be very careful how we walk down the line of what's going to be revealed and what's going to be subject to public view for a lot of reasons. You got to weigh the interests of both parties and say, Officer Chauvin, who is now a defendant on the opposite side of what he's been most of his career, also gets those same rights. And his attorneys are saying, we want to protect him from that onslaught of information that he's being basically buried with in order to allow him a free due process in his own defense.
Yeah, and this jury selection, it's going to be a hot mess. I would challenge anyone to find anyone in this country at this point in time who does not have some biases on either side and can look at this case impartially. And we're only a few months out. This jury selection is going to be crazy. But we've got to switch gears just a little. Let's talk about Breonna Taylor. We're hearing some updates in that case. Now, some time ago, I think it's about a couple of days or maybe a week or two now, I can't remember days with COVID-19 now, but Kenneth Walker had given an interview, and that interview came out. And in that audio, he told us that Breonna Taylor was alive moments after being shot. Now, let's listen to some of that audio and then bring out our experts to discuss more.
So it's a loud boom at the door. First thing she said was, "Who is it?" No response. So we like, what the heck? We both get up, start putting on clothes. Another knock at the door. She's like, "Who is it?" Loud at the top of her lungs. No response. So I'm like, what the heck? So then I grabbed my gun, which is legal, like I'm licensed to carry everything. I've never even fired my gun outside of a range. I'm scared to death. So she says that there's another knock at the door. She's yelling at the top of her lungs, and I am too at this point. Who is it? No answer, no response, no anything. So we like, what the heck? We both just see what I have on. Grab the nearest thing. These aren't even mine. These are hers. Like, so we both are just putting on something to go answer the door and see who's knocking at the door. It's late at night. So when we get out of the bed or whatever, like walking towards the door, the door comes off the hinges. So I just let off one shot. Like, I still can't see who it is or anything. So now the door's flying open. I let off one shot, and then all of a sudden there's a whole lot of shots. And we both just dropped to the ground, and the gun fell right over there. And I kicked it because I'm scared to death. Now we're seeing lights and stuff. So it's looking like, okay, it's the police, and there's a lot of yelling and stuff. So there's just shooting, and we're both on the ground, and then when all the shots stop, I'm panicking. She's right there on the ground, bleeding, and yeah.
Now, Lisa, I know we were talking about this during the break earlier on in the show, and this is something that's always really perplexed me. I've only seen a couple of no-knock warrants being executed based on body cam, and I review it afterwards. But when I got all the facts together, this one confused me, and you gave a pretty good answer as well. What confused me is the shooting occurs back and forth. The officer takes one to the leg, they return fire. I understand that. But then Kenneth Walker is able to call 911, and when he calls 911, either one of two things are happening. Either he is the greatest actor of all time, and in that moment, he can lie to 911 and be like, I didn't know it was officers, or he's truly confused. And then he makes two other calls, and in my mind, I'm thinking, well, why aren't the officers screaming in the background? I mean, they just got shot. They should be telling the people inside what to do, come out with their hands. But you don't really hear that in the 911 call, and I'm always scratching my mind thinking, what are the officers doing? I'm assuming they're giving aid to their fellow officer, but can you kind of paint a picture of what officers might be doing in that situation and why we might not have heard them in the background?
Right. So once the officer retreated who was shot, there was nobody in the home any longer. And return fire was executed through a closed door and through a curtain, unfortunately, where you don't know what the backdrop is. You don't know what the target is behind. It's just complete mayhem. So, in those moments, what was happening? Yes, they were rendering aid. There was retreating, but they were still covering the house. He did have the opportunity to call 911 and do the right thing and try to get help because he was confused. Why would he call 911 if he thought the police was outside? So I do believe that there was complete confusion in those moments where he didn't know what was happening. And, we looked at the amount of time it took for the police officers to get inside. And I could explain that a little bit further if I have an opportunity.
Please, please.
So once the officer was outside and the shots were fired, it was about 12:48 a.m. And the officers did not get in the house until 1:10 a.m. And they said that he was on the phone. He was talking to 911. They finally got him out of the door 15 minutes after the initial shooting. So when you look at the time that he was taken into custody, the amount of time it took for the police to get in the house, everything was on par in that timeline. So the opportunity to search, make sure there were no more occupants in the house, there was nobody else with guns and weapons. It's tedious. You're looking through doors, you're looking under furniture, and then finally, when they did find her, that's when ambulatory was also called for her, etc.
Yeah. Now, Austin, let's bring you into this as well. We're hearing more information about the fact that they didn't render aid right away. She was still alive. And I understand what Lisa is saying, and it makes perfect sense. That's why I asked her. She's got the background. She's enlightening not only our audience, but myself as well. But I also think of some cases, and the first one that comes to my mind is a Kai Gurley in Brooklyn with Peter Liang, where the crux of that case rested on the fact that they did not give aid right after the shooting because officers occupy this space of both enforcing the law, but also as first responders. So do you see a potential argument for prosecution for that not giving aid after shooting 8 times, as Lisa described, even through a window, not knowing who was there?
Listen, it is going to boil down to that very elusive idea about what was reasonable under those circumstances. The officers have guidelines. There's a process that on which they're supposed to enter situations like this, a no-knock. There's all sorts of other sort of less severe means that could have been engaged. This was ultimately a search warrant, not even an arrest warrant for a particular person. It was to try to find evidence of a crime, in this case, narcotics, at a location. Engaging the individuals with this level of immediate sort of going to level 10 with, a battering ram and multiple officers coming in within 45 seconds of the first supposed knock, the door comes flying off the hinges, and as Mr. Walker describes, an explosion happens. Then after, the officers may have, by their own kind of conduct, heard lots of noise and reacted with fire. Whether they heard a shot or not, Walker says a single shot, but it was very questionable almost under any circumstances, and I think may rise in some minds to the level of criminally irresponsible for the officers to then just start firing wildly into the darkness, 20 some odd shots at individuals of whom they don't know the disposition of. It just was reckless. Bullets went through other neighbors' homes. Multiple other 911 calls came in because no one knew what was happening in that apartment building. So it was an extremely kind of outrageous act as I see it. Others can see it differently. We understand the officers certainly probably weren't there to commit a homicide, but the response and the way they governed their conduct that night, it just really could have been done in so much more effective and less harmful ways.
Agreed. Now, just as an update, Mattingly and Cosgrove are on administrative reassignment, while Hankinson was fired in June and is appealing his terminations. The attorneys for Taylor have alleged Hankinson, who was outside the apartment and has been accused of firing blindly at least one of and committing to one of the fatal shots. So that's where we are now with those three officers, 2 on reassignment, 1 was fired, and we'll see where that case continues to go. We're going to take a quick break and come back with more here at Law&Crime Report.
I'm Doug Hirsch. You may already know that GoodRx can help you save up to 80% on your prescriptions. Unfortunately, many Americans can't get to a doctor right now. The good news is that for many health issues, you can see a doctor online. It's easy. Just go to GoodRx.com, and with a few clicks, you'll be treated by a licensed medical professional, all from the comfort of your own home. Visits are confidential and affordable. Need a prescription? Your doctor can send it to your pharmacy or have it mailed to you. Get the healthcare you deserve at GoodRx.com.
This is the kind of card that has America talking. With it, people with Medicare are getting all-in-one coverage for their doctor visits, hospital care, prescription drugs, and more. This kind of insurance, called Medicare Part C, may also cover dental care, eyeglasses, hearing aids, fitness programs, vitamins, even healthy meals and rides to the doctor. With this kind of coverage, you do not need a Medicare supplement insurance plan. You will access your benefits through your Medicare Part C plan for one low and oftentimes $0 monthly plan premium. You deserve to get the most from your Medicare benefits. Call now for free information that may help you get more coverage for less money. There is no obligation to enroll. Whether for yourself or someone you love, call the number on the screen now. Call now.
Here's important information for anyone with an annuity or structured settlement. It's your right to sell all or part of your annuity payments for the cash you need now. Whether you need to make an important purchase, pay off debt, or build a business, call the pros at Peachtree today. We can help you get the cash you need. We're professionals at buying structured settlements.
Hi, I'm Maggie from Peachtree. We've been helping people for over 20 years. We can help you turn your settlement or annuity payments into the cash you need for a new car, housing, or to manage debt. Recently, I helped a customer get money for fertility treatments to start a family. It's your money, and you have the right to use it now.
Get your money faster by calling Peachtree now at 800-738-4198. Call today for a free quote. You may even qualify for a cash advance. That's 800-738-4198. Or visit PeachtreeFinancial.com.
We all know that movement is like medicine, but getting the movement you need to feel better can be a challenge. Now you can keep fit while you sit with QB, the world's leading compact seated elliptical. QB gives you active sitting, letting you burn calories and keep moving in an easy and low-impact way, all while you work, read, or watch TV. QB was named a top 10 gift by Time Magazine and has been featured all over the world. It's whisper quiet while it works your abs and core, hip flexors, glutes, quads, hamstrings, and calves.
QB is a lifesaver for me.
Here's your answer to your problem.
I feel young again.
Join the hundreds of thousands of people moving more with QB. Call to find out how to get your QB with free shipping and a 30-day completely risk-free trial. You'll also get this QB workout mat free. Now keep fit while you sit with QB.
To order, call 800-226-9456. That's 800-226-9456. Call now.
Are you getting the most out of your Medicare plan? Many people with Medicare are eligible for plans that include extra benefits in addition to those found in original Medicare. Benefits like dental, vision, and prescription drug coverage. In many areas, plans with benefits are available with $0 monthly premiums or $0 deductibles. Call now. The consultation is free and there's no obligation to enroll.
Call 1-800-934-6136. That's 1-800-934-6136.
All right, so that is a clip of something we've shown you in the past. It's a number of Black Lives Matter protesters ranging from all walks of life, one of which we found out was NFL player Kenny Stills. 87 people were arrested. Now, there were far more people there. Officers told them they can leave or face arrest. Only 87 of them decided to stay. Now we're hearing that all of those charges, including the felony charges, have been dropped. I'm joined here with Lisa Lockwood as well as Austin Dove. Austin, let's start with you. I know we have our own kind of tongue-in-cheek way of describing how this went down and why the charges are dismissed. Give us your impression as to these charges being dismissed.
Ultimately, it boils down to just case management and public moment and what really is a makeable offense. I mean, this is a peaceful protest, very well organized. While there might be a charge for trespassing or denying some sort of restriction on the process, this sort of organized civil disobedience never lands well with the fact finder, is unpopular for a prosecutor, difficult to make for the line prosecutors down the line in order to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. And ultimately, when you have 80-odd people in court on charges like this, all of whom would assert their right to a trial and put on a defense, it would be a management nightmare just to try to bring that through, never mind the provability of what conduct was done by sitting on lawns and calling out for Breonna Taylor's process.
Now, Lisa, the protesters were charged with intimidating a participant in a legal process, which is a Class D felony, punishable by 5 years in prison, as well as a misdemeanor of trespass and violations, which have less serious charges. But one of the things in the article that I think are very true is that they highlighted how the police operated. And I think this was an opportunity that the police took on very well. And they did operate very well within the parameters of the rights because these people were committing crimes, especially disorderly conduct and trespass, but they gave people an opportunity to leave. Some people did, and those who didn't were properly arrested and they had probable cause to do so. Can you talk to us about, and I can only imagine how difficult that would be, can you talk to us about the difficulties of arresting 87 people and doing so in such a professional and proper way?
Yes, because police want to be there and protect a peaceful protest. They want to be there in support of that and to keep everybody safe. So the people who were ultimately arrested, who decided that they weren't going to leave, I think it was just a matter of setting a precedent to say that we're still willing to stand up. We're still willing to go through arrest. We've seen celebrities get arrested for trespassing over and over again. This has been in the public eye for such a long amount of time. I think that they just wanted to stick to their guns and do that. And the police, acted accordingly. As you said, they took the 87 who decided that they were not going to leave, went ahead with the charges. Their hands were tied. They did what they needed to do, the police officers, and ultimately I think the right decision was made as far as dropping the charges.
Yeah, and this is what Jefferson County Attorney Michael Connell said in regards to this incident. Quote, while we do believe that the LMPD had probable cause for the charge, in the interest of justice and the promotion of free exchange of ideas, we will dismiss the charge for each protester arrested. And I know, I mean, Austin, this is up your alley in terms of representing protesters. What do you think about this in terms of their move? Because you did co-found an organization to help represent protesters. What do you think about that move?
Well, I think it's the right decision. I mean, we have, and this may also be the case in Louisville, essentially an army of attorneys who are very skilled and qualified that we put together here, and have been similarly, we know similar setups around the country. What each individual protester has that right to a full due process, including all the way up to a trial. And the interest of justice is essentially a recognition that balancing everything else and balancing everything out in the interest of fairness, in the interest of what really happened, how egregious was the conduct, was there a risk to the public safety, was there something that was incredibly, an important message or precedent that the DA would want to send. And it doesn't really pass the smell test on any of those levels. So that's the reason why we held firm and have had many of our cases dismissed. Only the outliers where someone was, throwing a rock or doing something that was really harmful, have we seen those cases kind of stay along. But for the most part, standing there and engaging in what John Lewis, the late John Lewis, would say was a proper, demonstration of civil disobedience in order to try to effectuate change. I think this was done within those parameters. To Ms. Lockwood's point, absolutely the officers did what they had to do. But when you kind of boil it all down, you got a person arrested for something like this, it just is not going to survive in the long run in terms of the court of public opinion and in the court of law.
Yeah. Now let's switch gears just a little, because if you woke up this morning anywhere in America, you probably heard this gruesome story, this crazy story of a judge's husband being shot and seriously injured and her son being killed when they answered the door to a man that they believed to be delivering packages. As the story continued, just not too far from actually where we are in our studios today, about an hour and a half from where we are in the Catskills, New York, the body of who they believe to be Roy Den Hollander was found. And they're saying there may be a potential connection between the killing of this son and the injury of the father, as well as the killing of another individual in California. This is boggling the mind. Lisa, let's bring you in on this, because the intricacies, again, in terms of the investigation, how this all played out, they're saying that this lawyer, Hollander, was before the Judge Salas about a year ago, arguing the constitutionality of I believe, the draft, that women should be allowed to volunteer for the draft. And he has some pretty staunch views on a number of things. Ladies' nights. I don't know why you don't support Ladies' Night, but okay. In different, he calls himself an anti-feminist, however he depicts that. Talk to us about this case and how you learned about it and all the different bits and pieces of it.
Yes, and self-proclaimed femi-Nazi. So he certainly had his aggression toward women and feminist groups without question. So ultimately what the police were able to find on the scene was the beginnings of a memoir, a list of individuals that he had planned on going after, he had a vendetta against. We discovered in those letters, and also a GoFundMe page, that he had cancer, and he wanted to even the score. His words, there's not enough time to even the score against all these people who purportedly did wrongs against him because of his incredible, horrendous views of anti-women and anti-feminism.
Yeah, and to your point, Lisa, in terms of those documents, you saw other names. We saw Judge Janet DeFiore, who's actually the head judge in New York State, as one of them as well. He seemed to have a very specific mantra and ideology to, I would say it's women of power. He had a real issue with not only women, but women of power, and he from what they're hypothesizing is, and we do not know if this is true, what they're hypothesizing is he was terminally ill, and this was his way of just kind of checking the boxes off, quote unquote, before he passed. Mr. Austin, what do you make of this, finding out all the bits and pieces of who he's targeting and now finding his body in the Catskills?
You know, listen, the anomalies of individuals who are out there are as many as there are people. And, you know, people can create cause or identity around so many and varied ideas, many of which we find to be disturbing at the least, and many more dangerous. I mean, what we're really seeing here is, in this individual at least, a vendetta against anybody who kind of stood against him. He couldn't win in court, or at least he couldn't win all the way that he wanted to in court. Probably felt like this cancer was his mission to go off and purge at least the people that he had contact with from, you know, and make you know, sort of cause harm to these individuals who had not agreed with his position. And then he acted out in this very violent way. It's devastating, as you said from the outset, for a child, a 20-year-old boy, a college student, and a husband, in this case, of the judge, to be killed. It just doesn't, you know, whatever you think of judges and decisions and where you stand on law, this has no place in a civilized society, and it's outrageous. And the fact that he was cowardly enough to take his own life is also yet another example of just how disturbed this person was. There will always be disturbed people out there. It's just unfortunate that it was visited on this judge who essentially was kind of a trailblazer in her own right, the first Latina judge in that district in the federal court, and had, you know, from what I read, at least decided the prior case sort of split the baby with him. Part of the issues were in his favor, part of the issues were not, but she certainly didn't have any animus toward him. He's just a misguided, dangerous, and deranged individual.
Now let's listen to NBC describe this attorney and some of his background as well.
Says he was targeting the judge and her family, and perhaps a lawyer in California last week too. Those who knew him described him as an oddball attorney, and in his writings he raged against women and joined anti-feminist groups on Facebook. And he voiced anger at federal judge Esther Salas before he allegedly went to her New Jersey home yesterday.
Hollander appeared in front of the judge last year in a fight over whether the military draft can be men only. The suspected killer later called the well-respected judge, quote, a lazy and incompetent Latina judge appointed by Obama. Hollander also wrote of his hatred of his own mother and other women and raged about female judges. Neighbors in North Brunswick saddened by the shooting, calling the judge and her family wonderful people.
His family was a tight family, just close, loving, doting parents.
In addition to the upstate search, the FBI searching Hollander's Manhattan apartment for evidence, including perhaps a delivery or FedEx uniform used by the shooter at the judge's New Jersey home. The FBI believes Hollander's violent rampage may have started last week in California.
All right, so Lisa, before we go to break, my question for you is, we have all these facts. Someone is dead, someone is injured, a body is found in the Catskills. What are the next steps for us in terms of investigation? Because there seems to still be a lot of questions here. What are you going to expect?
The most important thing right now is the tool of the offense, the gun. Was that the same gun that he used to kill himself? And if not, are they going to be able to find the gun that was used on the judge's son and husband?
Yeah. And of course, I think they'll probably try to compare the striations on the bullet between the gun from both bullets on both sides. That's going to be interesting. I'm hoping that they find as much information as possible and we can find some sort of solace and some sort of justice afterwards, and obviously wishing that family and that community a speedy recovery. We're going to continue with more here at the Law and Crime Report after this break. All right, so our last story of the day comes out of a civil lawsuit facing by Fox News, where the anchor Ed Henry, along with others, are being accused of rape and other sexual assault charges. Now, Ed Henry was fired over that misconduct, but two women are alleging that others within that organization also committed to crude, lewd, or sexual behavior. Again, we're joined by we're joined with Lisa Lockwood as well as Austin Dove. Lisa, let's start with you because we were talking over the break about it and you seem to be well versed on this. Break this down for us and tell us where you think we might be going in the future with this case.
Okay, so obviously Roger Ailes, an entire movie was made about that situation and the sexual harassment and him being taken down and head of Fox, et cetera. What they're trying to assert is that the climate is still there and it's still relevant and it is still strong. Ed Henry, they believe they had enough against him to go ahead and fire him, that the charges of sexual harassment in the civil suit were legitimate, so they are going to go forward with that. Now we have Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, and Howard Kurtz thrown into the mix of all this with all different allegations against them. Sean Hannity alleged to have offered $100 in front of the entire crew in studio to say, hey, any of you guys want to take her out on a date, take her to Del Frisco's, which is a hangout for Fox News personnel across the street. Another event with Tucker Carlson, when they were there for a Christmas party, he said, I plan on dipping out early. I don't plan on staying. I'll be in my hotel room alone with no wife and kids. So that obviously, if that was said, that was definitely a form of sexual harassment. And Howard Kurtz of Media Buzz, he made the assertion of meeting when she was a regular guest on the show, meeting in the lobby and her declining offers to go out with him and him making the statement that he's never been refused before.
Thank you for that, Lisa. And it's just, Austin, I'm shaking my head here. I'm reading some of the quotes. It seemed like Henry's lawyer, and he's the one that was dismissed from Fox. So it arguably, at least the strongest case that these two women may have, as even Fox is recognizing there is maybe some sexual misconduct. But Henry's lawyer is saying that, quote, the Me Too movement has helped to bring to light a number of injustices in our society, and everyone has suffered deserves to be heard. This one is not one of those cases. The evidence in this case will demonstrate that Ms. Urquhart, that's one of the women, initiated and completely encouraged a consensual relationship. Ed Henry looks forward to presenting actual facts and evidence which will contradict the fictional accounts contained in the complaint. The evidence includes graphic photos and other aggressively suggestive communication that Ms. Urquhart sent to Mr. Henry. I get that, Austin, and as a lawyer, I totally hear you. I want to believe every woman, but also from a legal standpoint, there's a part of me that says, I also remember about Carolyn Bryant and Emmett Till, and sometimes we always got to get the facts. But I always come back to, if Fox News is telling you that Ed Henry was wrong, that's not a good place to start off with. What do you think?
No, I agree totally. And never mind the fact that they have a potential exposure on a civil lawsuit. So making a concession that early could be as a dangerous play. But really, no matter how you slice it, you're looking at still much more work to be done in the area of what these media room cultures are like. If you know, you have really the megastars of not just Fox, but really of all of kind of journalistic television media right now, engaging in fraternity-like childish behavior. Meet me in a hotel room, slipping someone $100, making all these provocative suggestions to working women. It's really it speaks to just another reset needs to happen there. And very often it's a case that these attorneys would have to prove. But that reset comes through the process of a lawsuit. Discovery happens, both sides exchange their battle plans, and something will sort out. Sometimes it's settled in the quiet of night. Sometimes there's actually trials that produce more public information. But this is, both sides are going to have to really dig in hard about what this really means. One of the individuals, of course, has asserted that this is outrageous. Nothing like this happened. We've seen that happen, and sometimes later on you see them kind of folding and giving a mea culpa or an apology. Where this will land, we don't know, but we certainly know that it takes some courage for these women to stand up and assert their rights and say, look, this is something that should not happen. And we know that some of these women had their employment affected, which is yet another issue in the matter. So they're seeking, damages, they're seeking change in these institutions, and they're the people that are kind of carrying the load.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to end off. They definitely are carrying the load because it is not easy in the situations when women step up in this way, shape, or form, and to do so against such a huge culture is very courageous. And so I would encourage them to do so and also bring that information to light through evidence, through the court system, so you can find justice not only civilly, but maybe even potentially criminally. We're going to continue with our regularly scheduled program after this, but we'll see you tomorrow at Law and Crime Report. Have a good day.